The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Preface. About these bears. The story of Teddy B and Teddy G would never have been written if there had not been some real live boys and girls to give it inspiration, Nin to criticize, Ruth to suggest, and Jack to praise. They made the story possible, and dozens of the most interesting incidents were suggested by their own unrecorded mischiefs. This story has already stood the public test. It was published serially in 20 leading daily newspapers, and has been received favourably by hundreds of thousands of children. No literary merit is claimed for it. The story is simply a good wholesome yarn, arranged in merry jingle, and fitted to the love of incident and adventure which is evident in every healthy child. Since the name Roosevelt has been used in the title, it may be of public interest to know that President Roosevelt and his boys have been pleased with the story as it has appeared in serial form. Seymour Eaton. End of Preface. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 1. The Roosevelt Bears leave their mountain home. 2 Roosevelt bears had a home out west, in a big ravine near a mountain crest, where they ate their meals and took their rest, and gathered sunshine and strength and cheer, and welcomed friends from far and near. They chopped down trees and hunters dared, and bossed their ranch and panthers scared, and preached to goats and bighorn sheep, and ordered that they the laws should keep. They boxed with chums and umpired strife, and generally led a strenuous life. One bear was black, and one was gray. Each was good, and neither would say a swear word loud either night or day. In love and learning they were both alike. They could run a motor, or hike a bike, or drive a hansom as good as Mike, or sit at dinner with the smartest set, or talk in a phone, or dance, or bet, or send wireless messages from tree to tree, or copy the styles, like you and me. These things they had learned from papers lost by weary travellers as the hills they crossed. They did things fair, and neither would bite, if deals were square, and white was white, and neighbours tried to do things right. They lived for fun, and not for fame, and if fame it came, it was just the same. They were honest bears from nose to paw. They kept out of debt and obeyed the law. The black bear's name was Teddy B. The B for black or brown, you see, or bright or bold, or brave or boss. He was always kind and seldom cross. The gray bear's name was Teddy G. The G for grizzly or gray or gay, for he was as full of fun as a bear can be. Not B for bad and G for good, the black bear wanted it understood. The Teddy part is a name they found on hat and tree and leggings round, on belt and boot and plates of tin, and scraps of paper and biscuits thin, and other things that hunters drop when they chase a bear to a mountain top. Their home was high and deep and wide, an elegant place for bears to hide the things picked up on the mountain side. They were well supplied with hats and boots, and leather coats and cowboy suits, and pots and pans and whips and strings, and guns and horns, and 100 things lost on the trail by hunters bold, when driven home by the winter's cold. The bears were tired of the life they led. They wanted to see the world, they said, to visit New York and Boston too, and perhaps Chicago and Kalamazoo, and to go to theatre and church and school, to see a banker or broker and fool with money a little, and try a hand at running a paper or leading a band. They had heard of things bears never see: golf and weddings and afternoon tea, trolleys and trains and buildings high, and machines that write and machines that fly, and hotels with waiters clear out of range, and bulls and bears in a stock exchange, and players who work for life and death, to punch a ball clean out of breath, and millionaires smart, and robbers bold, who play with wagon loads of gold, and folks high up in the social set, who walk on air and have style to let, and Tammany Hall, where a tiger rules, and the G.O.P. and its financial schools, and the president and his eldest son, and the Capitol at Washington, and other things both great and small that bears have never seen at all. The news had scattered far and wide that the bears would leave the mountainside, give away their goods and rent their trees, and travel east and beyond the seas. Their friends had gathered to laugh and sigh, to give advice and to say good-bye. A wild mustang was the first to arrive. The card said 6, but he came at 5. An old bobcat with a bandaged knee, and a young cougar and red squirrels 3, came jumping in from tree to tree. A panther bold and a gray coyote came up the creek in a hunter's boat. 2 bighorn sheep and a mountain deer climbed down on ladders from cliffs quite near, and a score or more of friends in need came in with baskets and to get a feed. Teddy G received each guest. He was brushed in style and did his best to make things hum and the evening go like a country dance or a minstrel show. A lunch was served by Teddy B, 12 pigeon pies and a fricassee of eagle's wings and chipmunk's feet, with honey sauce that you couldn't beat, and a salad dish made of hemlock cones, and fish's tails without the bones, a keg of milkshake with double tap, and a Roman punch made of cedar sap. 10 heads of cabbage to be eaten raw, and a roasted pig stuffed with lion's paw on the biggest platter that you ever saw, and bags of nuts, about a ton, supplied by squirrels for the evening's fun. The lunch was through and the play was on, when a shot was heard from a hunter's gun. The guests were ordered to run and hide, while the bears stepped out on the mountainside. A pistol was pointed by Teddy B at a hunter who stood beside a tree. "Hands up," he said, "you come with us. Don't touch your gun, don't make a fuss." The hunter was scared from head to toe. He had dropped his gun and he had to go. A lasso was thrown by Teddy G, and he caught his hunter about the knee, and tripped him up so that he couldn't see. They marched them both to their home nearby, and fed them on snails and pigeon pie, and toasted toads served with onion sauce, and chipmunk skins stuffed with mountain moss, and a peck of scraps both cold and hot, and all the soup left in the pot. It made the bobcat laugh and the hunters frown, but the bears stood by till all was down. After the hunters were introduced around to all the guests upon the ground, they were made to sign in red and white a bond the bears prepared that night, on birch bark paper and sealed in gold, which read like this in writing bold: "We hereby take oath on bended knee, that from this hour on we do agree to keep the peace and hunting stop from canyon deep to mountain top. In weather fair, in snow or rain, we'll never enter the bear's domain, or throw a stone or shoot again at goat or game, at bird or beast, till the bears return from their journey east." The paper signed, the law to keep, the guests lay down to have a sleep. The hunters were rolled in a blanket wide, and swung like a hammock from side to side, until both were snoring and satisfied. At break of day the hunters went. They left their guns and they left their tent. They left a note which read, they say, like this: "Dear Bears, we are off. Good day. We like your home, but we wouldn't stay for game or gold, for pie or pay. We are off for good. We won't come back. We never again will cross your track till nights are white and days are black. We hate your dinners. We love your pluck. Good-bye, old bears. Good day. Good luck." The sun rose up in a cloudless sky. The bears were ready. They said good-bye to friends and trees and stones and hills, and with money enough to pay their bills, and bags on backs and sticks in hand, they started their tramp across the land. End of section 1. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears, by Seymour Eaton. Section 2. The Roosevelt Bears race to catch the limited express. With burdens light and spirits gay, the two bears journeyed on their way. They followed a trail for miles alone. There wasn't a tree, there wasn't a stone. Simply a path over hill and plain, which came from nowhere and went back again. The sun was high in the eastern sky, and the bears were planning their lunch to try, when they came in sight of a ranchman's shack. The man had left and hadn't come back. No one was home but his chore boy, Jack. "Hello, good day," said Teddy B. "Where are the folks? We want to see inside your house. We're going to stay an hour for lunch, and perhaps we may sleep here tonight if you treat us right. Come, Jack, don't scare, these bears don't bite." Teddy G said, "Shake your hand, put it there. I love a brave boy, boys love a brave bear. We like every boy from Denver to Rome." And he gave Jack a handshake like fellows from home. Jack did as well as he could do to make a lunch, the best he knew, of boiled potatoes and chicken stew. He sold the bears some clothes to wear, as many things as he could spare: trousers and coats, a vest and cap, a leather belt, an Indian's wrap, a pair of gloves, a cattleman's whip, a silver watch, a purse for scrip, 2 pairs of shoes, bare feet to hide, and leggings with strings right down the side. They gave Jack gold, enough at least to buy a ticket back to the East, where Jack had a mother and sister and chum, who wrote him long letters and begged him to come. In half an hour the bears were dressed, their hair was combed, they looked their best. Teddy B and Jack had a little chat about forgetting friends and this and that, and learning to write and read and spell, and going back to his sister Nell, and his mother and chum whom he left behind, when he ran away the West to find. "Good-bye, old fellow," said Teddy G. "My love to Nell when your folks you see. Be square and white, don't do things wrong. I'll see you east. Good-bye, so long." About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they stopped to chat with a big raccoon, who asked them questions and said that he had been to school and knew ABC, and the football rules, and some geography, and the best way yet to climb a tree, and 3 Latin words, and a little Greek, and a place to fish in the mountain creek. These things he had learned from books and men. 5 years' hard work with teachers 10. The bears told him of their journey east, and the night before, and the farewell feast, and of plans they had but didn't care to tell to coons just then and there. Their feet were sore, the road was rough, the bears had tramped about enough. The raccoon advised them both to ride. He said he could find 2 horses tied in a little grove where cowboys keep some hammocks swung for their midday sleep. If the bears would follow, he'd find the place, help them to mount, and start the race. The bears got up on saddles round. The horses pranced and pawed the ground. "A king I'll be," said Teddy G. "I'll buy a bank and keep the key. I'll gather together a soldier band, and ride to the east and possess the land." "Don't be too smart," said Teddy B. "You have much to learn before you'll see yourself a king or a soldier bold. Take my advice and your pony hold, or you'll see a bear take a skyward sail over a horse's head or a horse's tail." The big raccoon admired the pair. He gave directions and told them where to find the road to the nearest train, and asked them to call when they came back again. The bears were off, the dust it flew. The road was wide, and the jockeys knew that the time was short and the hours were few, that the night express was always due at 5 o'clock and never late. If they missed the train, they'd have to wait. So they told the horses to do or die. If their legs gave out, they'd have to fly. Of all the races that were ever run, from Gilpin's sprint to Edmonton, or the ride that broke the 1-hoss shay, or a chariot race on a circus day, or the midnight ride of Paul Revere, or the cowboy's chase of a Texas steer, to the quickest time that was ever done, for might or money, for fame or fun, by racetrack mare or by motor car, this ride that day was best by far. No stop was made for drink or feed. they went by camps at breakneck speed. They waved their hats as boys they passed, and the lads said, "Gee, but they're going fast!" They asked a man how far they'd come. 150 miles, said he. When Teddy G called to Teddy B, "Well, I guess that's going some." Teddy G was the bear to win, but both were there when the train pulled in. To a colored porter in gray and gold, Teddy G gave a tip and said, "You hold these bags and sticks while we step aboard." But Teddy B said, "We can't afford to ride in a Pullman from west to east. It will cost $1 a day at least to shine my shoes and brush my hat." But Teddy G didn't scare at that. "We are in for fun. We have lots of stuff. I'll pay the bills. If I haven't enough, I'll send for more. We'll let folks see we can ride in style," said Teddy G. From an open window as the train pulled out, to the bronco racers folks heard them shout, "Get back to your ranch by tomorrow noon, and give our love to the big raccoon, and say to the cowboys up the state that we made our train and the ride was great." End of section 2. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 3. The Roosevelt Bears on the Pullman. As the train pulled out, the bears sat down on cushioned seats of velvet brown. They nodded to men and ladies too, and smiled and said, "How do you do?" to a little girl who asked her dad if bears were good, for the books she had said that bears were cross and often bad. "Don't you believe it," said Teddy G. "When we reach New York, you come with me, and I'll buy you candy, 10 pounds or more, the best they have in a Broadway store, and picture books which say that we are as fond of children as bears can be." Then Teddy G, to prove his talk, did a 2-step dance, and a new cakewalk, and a Dixie clog, and the Highland fling. He touched the bells to hear them ring, and kicked the lamps with both his feet, when the conductor asked him to take his seat. The bears looked out on fields and hills, on stores and churches and homes and mills, and it made them laugh from head to toe to see the world go flying so. Trees and posts went sliding by, they couldn't count, they didn't try. They asked the porter, his name was Bill, if the land were moving and if they were still, and Bill said, "Yes, I know it's true. The earth turns round in a day or two, but we'll beat the earth 2 hours at least in this railroad ride from west to east." A colored man all dressed in white, with a soldier cap and buttons bright, marched down the aisle like a jolly tar, calling, "Dinner ready in the dining car." The bears stepped forward and took their seats, and called for coffee and cheese and sweets, and peach ice cream and Betty Brown, when the waiter said, his face a frown, "Your bill of fare is upside down. Begin with soup and a half-shell clam, then fish, then mutton, with English jam." "You go to grass," said Teddy B. "I want my dinner, enough for 3. Make it upside down or right side up. But I don't want soup served in a cup, or clams or stones or a minnow fish. Bring soup in bowls and a good large dish of salmon trout and cod and bass, and a leg of mutton and a 2-quart glass of your richest cream with a loaf of bread, and a bunch of celery and a lettuce head. We're bears, not mice. Now take your hint. While these you get, I'll read your print." "The same for me," said Teddy G. "Get a man to help. Get 2 or 3. We're about as hungry as bears can be. Make my meat rare. I want enough. Don't stop to talk. Bring on the stuff." The waiters were scared from black to blue. They upset the dishes and spilled the stew, and told the cook that he must do the best he could with the food on hand, for bears could eat to beat the band. But the play at dinner was square and white compared with the fun they had that night. "I won't sleep upstairs," said Teddy G. "I want a window. I want to see the moon go round, and the trains go by, and the sun get up in the morning sky." But Bill said, "Hush, put in your head, the folks in the car have gone to bed." But Teddy G didn't scare a bit. He got out of bed and said he'd sit up all night like owl or cat before he'd sleep on a shelf like that. He'd help the porter to do the chores, to answer calls and stop the snores, to shine the shoes and tickets take, and see that sleepers didn't wake. Teddy G had fun that night. He hid the shoes and put out the light, and made the porter keep out of sight, and saw the cook and got a bite of ham and cheese and a cup of tea. He woke the folks at 3:30, calling, "Breakfast ready, get up and see." He borrowed a banjo from a colored lad and rattled off "Everybody Works But Dad," and "Doodle Boy," and "Apple Tree," what the brass band played, and "Tammany," and "Katy Dear," and "My Irish Malio," and "Put Me Off at Buffalo." It was 4:30, the porter said, when Teddy B made him go to bed. The bears didn't wake for a day or more. They missed some meals, about 3 or 4, when Teddy G tossed Bill a dime and asked him to bring on dinner time. "I'm sorry, gents," said Porter Bill, "but lunch is over, and you fellows will have to wait right here for 6 hours at least, before you can have another feast." But that was more than the bears could stand. Teddy G stood up and reached his hand and caught a rope he saw running through from end to end, for he thought he'd do a dinner call when the whistle blew, and brakes went on and trainmen flew, and heads went out on sides to view the trouble in front or under or back, for all were sure they were off the track. The conductor came forward, a flag in hand, and said, "This is more than I can stand." But Teddy G said, "Boo, bah, boo! Get away from here, you fellows, you! I rang the bell for an Irish stew." But the conductor said, "Don't boo at me! I run this train, I'll let you see. The walking's good, and you can go from here to Chicago by heel and toe." And he put the 2 bears off the train on a Kansas farm in a shower of rain. End of section 3. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 4. The Roosevelt Bears on a Farm. The bears had learned from books they'd read that boys who want to get ahead must start by learning the farmer's trade, to split good rails and use a spade, and hoe potatoes and log and plow, and shear a sheep and milk a cow, or drive a calf on a country road, or break in steers to draw a load, or pump up water from a well, or take the things to town to sell. The bears were glad to have a chance to get a start toward high finance, to climb the ladder, round by round, to the very top where fame is found. They would stay a day to learn the trick, how farmer boys get ahead so quick. As they tramped along to the farmer's yard, the black bear scolded good and hard about the mischief on the Pullman train, and being put off in a shower of rain. Teddy G declared that he'd be good if the farmer's wife would give him food. The rules on farms he understood, and he'd do the very best he could. They found the farmer splitting wood, and they stepped up bold and said, "Good day, do you want some hands to plant your hay, to dig your wheat, to sow your eggs, or to pack your milk in tubs and kegs? We're here to learn the farmer's trade, to swing a flail or to use a spade. We're freshmen now, and green at that. We're here to study right off the bat. We learn new things at a lively rate, and by 6 o'clock we'll graduate." The farmer nearly lost his breath. The 2 bears scared him half to death. "The farm is yours," the old man said. "You have the job. Now go ahead. You milk the cows, and load the hay, and hoe potatoes for half a day, and feed the sheep and plant the corn, and come to supper when we blow the horn." The farmer gave them clothes to wear, and quit his work right then and there, and asked his neighbors from all around to come and see what he had found. 2 bears let loose from a circus show, or out of a zoo, he didn't know. The news had spread both near and far that bears had fallen from moon or star, or had tumbled off a railroad car, or had rambled over the fields to feed, or had simply grown in the night from seed. They were there that day, this much was true, but where they came from no one knew. If Jack or Jill, who went up the hill, or Marjorie Daw or her cousin Bill, or little Bo Peep who lost her sheep, or Humpty Dumpty on the wall asleep, or little Jack Horner or Dickory Dock, or the 3 little mice who ran up the clock, or old Mother Hubbard or the piper's son, or their brothers and sisters every one, or the brindled cow who jumped over the moon, had seen the bears that afternoon, they'd have quit their work and lost their pay, and split their sides with laugh and play. At least that's what the children say, for Teddy B and Teddy G made farming hum in a different key. They hitched 2 pigs to the farmer's plough, and caught a goat and showed him how to hold the handles and steer the crown, and make the clay turn upside down. The farmer's horses and cows and sheep came rambling near to take a peep. The black bear hired them one by one, and said if their work was carefully done, he would give them each $1 a day, and at the end of the week would raise their pay. The horses were told to use their legs, and to get to work at gathering eggs. The sheep were given the corn to hoe, the potatoes to plant, and the wheat to sow. The cows were asked some cheese to make, a tub of butter, and a ton of cake. A rooster was caught by Teddy G, and stood on a fence where all could see, and made to sing like a dicky bird, the funniest song you ever heard. The geese and ducks and turkeys too had 150 things to do. But the funniest caper of that day was with a machine for cutting hay, and oats and stuff for horses' feed. Teddy G was bold. He wouldn't heed when the farmer's boy said, "It has a fit. If you start that chopper, it will never quit." But Teddy G never scared a bit. He let it go full lickety-split, and piled in the straw and oats and hay, when his coat got caught in the wheels some way, and he got mixed with hay and straw, his hair and clothes from head to paw. It took 2 men and Teddy B from 2:30 to 3:30 to get him loose from the old machine, with his trousers up where his coat had been. The most upset bear that was ever seen, he was 1/2 an hour in getting clean, and rubbing oil his sores to cure. If he'd had a tail, he'd have lost it sure. While walking around the work to view, they came to a fence where a bull looked through. When Teddy G said, "Old bull, you come along with us, stop chewing gum. We'll hitch you to the farmer's cart, and make you draw things quick and smart." The bull looked up and winked his eye, and said, "All right, I'd like to try. Climb over the fence, it isn't high." The bears got over. They rued the day. The moment they landed, the bull made hay. He tossed the bears in the sky so high they didn't come down till by and by. He chased them to an old straw stack, and over the top, and down and back, and round and up the side, and down again without a guide, till they found a hole where both could hide. Then Teddy G made a lasso long, with a piece of rope both stout and strong, and he brought that bull to his knees so quick, he couldn't hook and he couldn't kick. His ears looked sad, his eyes looked sick. He simply bellowed with all his might, "Don't jerk so hard, don't pull so tight. I'll take the job, I'll give up the fight." Then Teddy B said, "It wasn't strange if bulls and bears in a stock exchange had ups and downs, and puts and calls, and skyward jumps and headlong falls. But farming's what we're learning now, and if you'll behave, we'll show you how." The bull was hitched up to the cart, and made to draw things quick and smart. When at 6 o'clock the hornet blew, the bears said, "Stop, the work is through!" And all hands quit and went their way. The bears went round to the house to stay, to wash their hands and brush their hair, and get some newer clothes to wear. And see the folks, and get some meat, a pumpkin pie, and jellies sweet, and other things that farmers eat. They slept that night in the stable mow, and dreamt that they were farmers now, and had the trade and knew the trick, how farmer boys get ahead so quick. End of section 4. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 5. The Roosevelt Bears at a District School. The district school was a mile away. The bears were free and thought that they would go to school for at least a day. They had learned to farm and knew the way to sow the grain and cut the hay, or to catch a bull or drive an ox, or to get chopped up in a cutting box. They would go to school to work and play, to read and write and cipher too, and get good marks as schoolboys do, and talk out loud and laugh and see if the teacher would whip or let them be. They'd rested well in the mow of hay, they'd finished breakfast at break of day, they'd brushed their clothes and shined their shoes, and smoked a pipe and read the news, and were ready now for a day of fun, which would beat the farm or the bronco run. They cut long gads, a good-sized bunch. The farmer's wife packed a basket lunch, and gave them books and slates and pads, and started them off like country lads. The farmer stood at the garden gate, and said, "Good-bye. If you lads are late, the teacher will keep you in at night, and give you 1,000 words to write." "Don't you worry," said Teddy B. "We'll be on time, my chum and me. A little learning is a dangerous thing. We'll get it all, and then we'll fling it here and there as east we go, to let folks see how much we know." 'Twas the month of June, the day was fine. The children gathered prompt at 9. Teddy B sat down on the teacher's chair, took off his hat and brushed his hair, and banged the desk and said that he would run that school that day and see that letters danced and figures flew, and that boys were good and their lessons knew. He'd make things hard and play hours few, and keep those in who dared to do their lessons wrong or writing bad. He'd scold them well and use the gad. He had heard it said in countries wild that to spare the rod was to spoil the child. Teddy G stood just inside the door to check the lates and keep the score, while the teacher sat on a corner stool and let the 2 bears run the school. The first class called were little tots, with picture cards and squares and dots to count and add, and color blocks to pile in heaps, and little clocks to mark the time. But Teddy B said, "The book I teach is ABC." And he asked them each in turn to say the alphabet from Z to A, and little words like OX, ox, and AN, an, and FOX, fox. When these they knew, he let them go to the fields outside for an hour or so. The next class called was number 2. They stood in line their work to do, and started in on problems new. If half of 6 is an eighth of 3, how much will a third of a quarter be? If a man and a boy can lift a ton, how big is the man, and how old the son? If a camel can go without water a week, how long could he go if he owned a creek? If a woman can sew a seam a day, how many needles in a stack of hay? If your mother's uncle and your father's niece buy apples and cakes at a cent apiece, and eat the apples and sell the cake at 2 cents each, how much do they make? If you add 100 and subtract a score from 1,000 dozen and 50 more, and divide what's left by half of 3, how much will remain for you and me? If a boy can lift 10 pounds alone, how many pounds in 3 loads of stone, a barrel of potatoes, and a ton of brick? These few problems were run off quick, and every boy found a place to stick. When Teddy B saw the class was beat, he howled and pranced and stamped his feet. The slates he smashed and chalk did eat, and asked each boy to take his seat, and said that teaching was very bad. If it didn't improve, he would use the gad. He gave them each to do that night 100 million words to write. The class in history was called up front, and asked to open their books and hunt for King Alfred's cakes, and Caesar's ghost, and the place where battles were fought the most, and Cromwell's hat, and the cloth of gold, and the place where Penn the Indians sold, and Boston tea, and Faneuil Hall, and a lot of things not there at all. The teacher said to Teddy B, "They're not yet through the book, you see. If you'll give them battles and dates to do, like Marathon and Waterloo, and 1492, they'll get good marks, 100 plus. Don't be so hard, don't make a fuss." But Teddy B said, "Never mind. We'll examine the classes, and if we find the teaching bad, we'll cut your pay to 37 cents a day." The history class was told to stay for an hour that night to read and spell and learn to say their lessons well. A class in geography was next brought forth. They were asked the distance from south to north, and told to bound the moon and sky, and name the capital of by and by, and tell the distance from sun to star, and measure the poles, and tell how far from west to east in a Pullman car, and to draw the bottom of Great Salt Lake, and tell how long a boat would take to sail in waters of every sort, and stop at every ocean port. They were asked to name Chicago streets, and railroad lines and ocean fleets, and to name a farm in every state, and to open the latch of the Golden Gate, and to make a list of the hills of Rome, and to name the people who lived at home, and show on the map the weather line, when the nights are wet and the days are fine, and tell at once the other name for the land of Nod, and the peaks of fame, and if capes are worn now just the same. The Missouri boys said, "I want to know," but they couldn't make the questions go. They were ordered quickly off the floor, and were told to read their books once more. Teddy B said he supposed it true that the children answered all they knew. He knew these things when but a child. He guessed he'd make the whippings mild. If work was bad and they failed to pass, it was the teacher's fault and not the class. The tricks they played that day were great, the Black Bear teacher and Gray Bear mate. They tossed the globe from hand to hand, and lifted a boy and made him stand on top of their heads while they marched around, and thumped their slates to music sound. They climbed the rope that rang the bell, and opened a store and tried to sell the children's lunch and books and caps, and pens and ink and chalk and maps. They made boys laugh and the teacher frown, and turned the schoolroom upside down. The bears were glad the day was o'er. They told the boys to work no more. The world was made, they said, for play, and boys and girls were just as gay where schools were closed and teachers' pay was used for candy every day. They asked the children not to cry as they doffed their hats and said goodbye. End of section 5. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 6. The Roosevelt Bears at the County Fair. The bears had learned the farming trade. They could milk a cow or use a spade. They'd taught a school and learned the trick how country boys get ahead so quick. They were ready now for city life, for fame or fun, for business strife. They had rested up for a day or more. They'd bought some things in a country store, 2 sweaters gay, a red and blue, some lighter shoes and stockings too, 2 caps, the kind that tourists wear, and walking sticks, and a dozen pair of cuffs and collars of glossy white to wear when they went out at night, and pins and buttons on cards in rows, and 2 handy grips to hold their clothes. They said good-bye to farm and beast, and started again on their journey east. "Pullman travel," said Teddy B, "is too expensive for you and me. Let's try an engine for a mile or so, to learn the way that engines go." "A good idea," said Teddy G. "I have always thought I'd like to be a circus clown or an engineer. You run the fire and I shall steer, and we'll make the engine hit a pace that was never seen in a railroad race." The engine stood on a siding near. No one was there. Bears have no fear. They hadn't learned, like me and you, the things that are wrong for bears to do. The men were in a house close by, waiting orders and eating pie. Teddy G climbed up to the engine cab, turned on the steam, and kept sharpest tab on things in front, at left and right, and watched when signals came in sight, while Teddy B with pokers ate, made the furnace blaze at a lively rate. They rang the bell and the whistle blew. The track was clear, and before they knew, they were in a town and had run clear through. They whizzed along for an hour or two, when a trainman waved a flag in front, and turned a switch, and made them bunt into a load of coal and a crossing gate, in a country town in Missouri State. They went up the street to look around. The air was filled with music sound, and crowds were moving here and there, and flags were floating in the air. They walked along to the public square, and stepped right into a county fair, the biggest crowds they had ever seen, with something doing on the green. Teddy G showed cards at the entrance gate, and said, "I'm sorry, but our train was late. The engine ran into an open switch, and almost put us in the ditch." "You'll excuse our clothes," said Teddy B. "We were in the country, don't you see, and didn't want to delay the fair while we changed our clothes or combed our hair." The official took them by the hand, and gave them seats on the judges' stand, where they could see the fun and hear the band. "We didn't come," said Teddy B, "to judge your show. We're here to see. If you don't mind, we'll walk around and see what's doing on the ground." They were out for fun. They didn't care. They saw the whole of the county fair. They shot for canes. It cost a dime. They hit the bull's-eye every time. They turned a crank to see butter made, and drank some purple lemonade. They climbed a pole and put up flags, and raced with boys in potato bags. They took a turn on the tandem wheel, and made the champion wheelman feel like 30 cents out in the rain, running a race with a railroad train. But the biggest fun of the fair that day was when Teddy G, the farmers say, walked out the pole or the river dam to win a prize and to get a ham, while Teddy B in a boat below gave him directions how to go. The pole it shook from east to west, and up and down it did its best to shake the bear, but Teddy G could walk a limb or climb a tree. And he did the pole from start to tip, with quickest step and without a slip. But every time he reached the ham, he tumbled headlong in the dam. Like Bruce's spider of days gone by, he'd try and try and try and try, till at last he won the money prize, and a Missouri ham of largest size. The children gathered in a ring to see them dance and hear them sing. They walked on ropes drawn good and tight, and jumped through hoops and landed right. They rode a donkey and bought some toys, and gave them away to girls and boys. The children found them cakes to eat, and asked them home their friends to meet. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, a man would go up in a balloon. The man was sick, he couldn't go, and Teddy B said, "If that is so, give us a chance. We'd like to try a little journey to the sky." The bears got in with grips and things, and bags of sand and food and strings, and telescopes and ropes and maps, the basket full of balloonist traps. A rope was fastened strong and tight. The balloon shot up to its greatest height. The crowd below made lots of noise. The 2 bears called down to the boys, "Let go the rope, we like the fun. It beats the farm or the bronco run." The boys called out to hold on tight. The bears called back, "Be sure to right." The rope was cut, and up they flew beyond the clouds and away from view. The crowd went home and talked for days of the jolly bears and their funny ways, of the tricks they played on the village green, and the stories told of things they'd seen. Folks watched the sky both noon and night. The balloon was not again in sight. End of section 6. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 7. The Roosevelt Bears in a Balloon. The balloon sailed up above the crowds, and the county fair, and beyond the clouds. The sky around was clear and blue, the earth below was lost to view. No sound was heard, the air was still, the space about was too big to fill with sound or house or town or hill. Distance was gone, and direction too. The bears had nothing left to do. There wasn't a thing to fasten to. The sun alone and dazzling bright seemed to be laughing at their plight. The first to speak was Teddy G. "The earth has dropped somewhere," said he. "Fell through those clouds, I saw it go, and where it's gone I want to know."
"Don't ask me," said Teddy B. "I never learned astronomy. We're off for good, dear knows how far. The sky will have another star. I suppose we'll have an orbit soon, and revolve around the sun and moon, and have day and night and spring and fall, or roll about like a rubber ball, or play with Jupiter, or the planet Mars, or ride on comets through the stars. Scholars will look through telescopes, and tell our weight, and count these ropes, and measure time back to our birth, and say we're peopled like the earth."
"Don't lose your head," said Teddy G, "for here's a chart which tells how we can steer this ship with greatest ease, and land at any point we please. The earth's down there, I know, somewhere, for I saw the town and the county fair, a bird's-eye view as the clouds went by and covered up the under sky." The bears sat down to read the books, and to study maps and examine hooks, and to learn the way to go up or down, and how high they were above the town, and how to anchor, and the thing to do if a storm came up and the wind it blew. It was nearly dark when Teddy G said he'd like to walk around and see what the sky was doing, and move his feet, and shake himself and get things to eat.
"We're on short allowance," said Teddy B, "like shipwrecked sailors out at sea. You can have 5 cakes and 2 chicken legs, and an apple pie and 6 hard-boiled eggs, and a loaf of bread and doughnuts 3, and a pound of nuts and a cup of tea."
"That's all right," said Teddy G. "I'll make it do till the night is through. But at breakfast time let this shipwrecked crew land on a planet or a twinkling star, or any place where there's a dining car. The air is pure at this skyward height, but it doesn't feed one's appetite." They sailed along at a rapid rate. There were no delays, no place to wait. The sun had gone clear out of sight. The moon was up, and the night was bright. The earth below went sliding by. They could see the fields and a great big Y where rivers joined and cities 4, with 100 million lights or more. When Teddy B said he'd bet his paw that the biggest town was Omaha, it grows day and night without a rest, and is the smartest place in the Middle West. "We're traveling north," said Teddy G, "or north by east, for a star I see. The northern star, the central hub, I learned its place when but a cub." And thus they chatted through the night, counting cities that came in sight, or climbing up the basket ropes, or viewing the moon through telescopes. At break of day there came in view a pair of cities, and a river too, and waterfalls and parkways wide, and little lakes on every side.
"Those towns I know," said Teddy B, a map spread out upon his knee. "With their parks and hills and buildings tall, are Minneapolis and St. Paul."
"If that is true," said Teddy G, "let us change our course, or we shall be in Canada or Hudson's Bay in another night and another day." But the wind it changed 10 points at least, and the balloon sailed south or south by east. Some clouds came by and hid their view, and there was nothing left for them to do but to curl up warm in the basket small, and wait for the old balloon to fall. They ate some breakfast and took a nap, and were called at 5 by a thunderclap. The bears jumped up with a startled look. They twisted ropes and threw out a hook, and pulled down flags and tightened strings, and looked aloft, and did other things that sailors do in an ocean breeze when the ship is rolled by angry seas.
"I believe I was dreaming," said Teddy G. "2 hunters were shooting at you and me. Those fellows we caught on the mountainside before we started on our eastern ride." "That shot was lightning," said Teddy B. "Look down below, and a storm you'll see." "A storm below! Good gracious me! Will it rain uphill?" said Teddy G. They pulled some ropes as directions read, and down they went like a lump of lead, clean through the clouds where the storm had been, to the biggest lake they had ever seen. "Throw out the sand," said Teddy B. "Unload the ship, or we're in the sea." And off went traps and ballast bags, and telescopes and wraps and flags, and boots and gloves and coats and caps, and guidebooks 10, and rolls of maps. The balloon went up, but it fell again, and ducked the bears in Lake Michigan. The wind was high, and the balloon it flew like a lifeboat sail with a shipwrecked crew, or up and down and round and back, like a scenic railway without a track. "There's trouble ahead," said Teddy G. "A thunderstorm on the lake, I see. The clouds are gathering as black as night. Another storm will smash our kite." Not quite so scared was Teddy B. "Chicago's your thundercloud," said he. "Look hard and see the buildings poke their lofty heads through the city's smoke. We're sailing south, we've turned about. We'll land at 8 if the gas holds out." They sailed along for an hour or more, hungry as bears and wet and sore. The storm had cleared, it was growing dark, when passing over Lincoln Park their anchor caught in a maple tree. "Let us get out," said Teddy G. "Chicago is good enough for me. I have seen too much of moon and star. I'd rather ride in a Pullman car, or go on foot, or stay right here and eat and sleep for about a year." "I'm your chum," said Teddy B. "There are children here I want to see. I have heard of folks who love to rise and soar in clouds and beyond the skies, or build fine castles in the air, but it doesn't suit a country bear. The thing's all right for an experiment, but for steady life, give me a tent." They slid down ropes and hit the ground, and landed in Chicago, safe and sound. End of section 7. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 8. The Roosevelt Bears meet Chicago children. The bears were now in Lincoln Park. The air was warm and the night was dark. "We've made good time," said Teddy B. "We've landed right side up," said he. "We're minus clothes and in a pretty mess, but we beat the Overland Express. If the sky were clear, I'd just as soon take another turn in the old balloon." "Not on your life," said Teddy G. "One ride like that is enough for me. Let us find a place where they'll feed us well, a dining car or a good hotel." They walked around for an hour or two. They talked through the fence at the Chicago Zoo to some friends they found imprisoned there, a wolf, a fox, and a grizzly bear. They asked them why they'd gone to jail. Had they stolen goods or robbed the mail? And couldn't they get out a week on bail? They promised to intercede at court, and to come back again and make report. They found a place on a busy street, a big hotel where things to eat were carried up to their room in style, above the street, about a mile. Reporters called to get the news about their trip and to print their views on Chicago's length and breadth and height, and what they thought of the town at night. 2 tailors came with cloth and tape to fit them out in handsome shape, with suits on order and ready made, and vests and ties of every shade.
A barber came to dress their hair, and a manicure, a lady fair, to brush a paw or trim a nail, and a messenger with evening mail, passes to plays and tickets free to everything there was to see. Callers came in crowds for hours, and telegrams and loads of flowers, and gifts in boxes and cards to tease, and 1,000 other things to please. The city mayor brought a bunch of keys, which opened every hall and store to the Roosevelt Bears for evermore. They rested up for several days to answer mail and to learn the ways of Chicago children and how to run an afternoon to give them fun. They hired the biggest hall in town. Teddy G said he would act the clown if Teddy B would run the show and explain the tricks and make things go. They borrowed helpers from the zoo, an elephant and a kangaroo, and 6 prairie dogs and monkeys too. They invited every boy between 6 years old and 17, and girls as many and of equal size, and for every one a handsome prize. The performing troupe was hard to beat, and the crowd which came filled every seat. A speech was made by Teddy B, who told the boys and girls that he believed in fun and honest strife, and manly sport and strenuous life, and things which made for stronger will, and helped weak boys to climb a hill. "The world," he said, "was made for play, and boys and girls should be always gay." The fun that day by Teddy Clown was the best that was ever seen in town, and the juggling tricks by Teddy B were the smartest that boys did ever see. He put a monkey in a hat, and shot a pistol, and took out a cat. He rolled 2 dogs up in a ball, until there wasn't anything there at all. He lifted up the kangaroo on the very top of a billiard cue, which he held on his nose while he walked around, and tossed 10 balls to music sound. A tub of water was brought to him. He put in the dogs and made them swim. He dipped the water out in pails, till there was nothing left but pigeons' tails. The tails he put where the dogs had been, and in half a minute they were dogs again. He made the elephant eat a meal perched on the rim of a wagon wheel, while the monkeys turned the wheel about, and the kangaroo hopped in and out between the spokes for an hour or more, making children laugh till their sides were sore. But the biggest fun that was made that day was by Teddy G with his clownish play. He cracked good jokes and a cowboy whip, and made things dance at every clip. He rode the elephant around the ring, and played for the monkeys and made them sing, and held a hoop while both jumped through, and turned handsprings over the kangaroo, and sang a song with encores 9, and danced a jig for every line. When the show was o'er, the crowd went wild. There were prizes given to every child. They clapped their hands and danced with joy, and cheered the bears, each girl and boy. They called aloud for Teddy G when he stepped out, and thus said he, "You'd scarce expect one of my age to speak in public on the stage. Chicago's great. I like the place. It's boys and girls, each happy face. I'll call around when back we come, and spend a month at every home." The bears returned to their hotel. Their show was great. They did it well. The papers praised their work and said that the Roosevelt Bears were far ahead in manly fun and jolly ways of anything they had seen for days. A card was found on their door which read, "Not into callers. We've gone to bed." End of section 8. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 9. The Roosevelt Bears see Chicago. The bears did nothing for several days, but enjoy the hotel and its modern ways. They rang for bellboys, just for fun, to give them a quarter and see them run. They ordered dinners, the waiters say, at 2 a.m. and at break of day. In the afternoon at 3:30 they always rang for a pot of tea. They changed their clothes every little while, and tried to do things in city style. They were there a week when Teddy B said he'd like to drive the town to see. "I should like it too," said Teddy G. "I'll order a carriage for you and me, with 2 men in front who'll sit up straight and drive us round at a lively rate." The carriage was ordered, and off they went, a happy pair on pleasure bent. The coachman made the horses fly, the crowd hurrahed as the Bears drove by. They saw the stores and buildings tall, post office square and city hall, and churches high and driveways wide, and 1,000 other things beside. They drove for hours through street and park, from early morn till nearly dark. They made a call at a candy store, and bought 100 pounds or more, done up in boxes with ribbons gay, to throw to children on the way. "Those pens and squares," said Teddy B, "drive over there, I want to see." "The Union Stockyards," the coachman said. "In there you'll see 1,000,000 head of cows and calves and pigs and sheep, and blood enough to make you weep." "I don't like the show," said Teddy G. "That Missouri Bowl was enough for me." And on they drove, new sights to find, and left the stockyards far behind. But neither spoke for an hour at least. They were comparing the lot of man and beast. To the athletic club they went for lunch, to try their cooking, and to show the bunch of athletes there what bears could do on a racing track, and a trick or two on swinging ropes and bars and rings, and how to swim, and 100 things about punching bags and playing ball that the fellows never knew at all. "I've lost a button," said Teddy G. "Drive to a store and wait for me. My collar's loose, it hurts my chin. The button's gone that held it in." Teddy B said he would go there too, to see the store and the things they do. The store was full, 'twas bargain day, or a markdown sale, as the papers say. Teddy G stepped up to a man, at ease, and said, "I want a button, please." "What kind of button do you want?" said he. "A collar button," said Teddy G. "Go down the aisle to the corner there, then turn to the right, take the moving stair, try the 2nd floor on the State Street side," said Teddy B. "Do we need a guide?" The man was off, 'twas his busy day, and the Bears were left to find their way, to reach the goal or the button spot, before the directions they forgot. When the stairs were reached, the Bears stood still. They asked a man how to climb the hill. "Don't block the way," the man replied. "Step on, be quick, there's no inside. The stairway climbs itself, you know. You just step on, and up you go." Teddy B went up on hands and toes, and tumbled headlong on his nose, while Teddy G held fast the rail, but back he came head over tail. "Let's try again," said Teddy B. "I like the sport, it's new to me." A crowd collected, one by one, to see the Bears and enjoy the fun. They reached the top in a little while, and with a graceful bow and pleasant smile they said good-bye to the crowds below, which had gathered to see the stairway show. "Now for that button," said Teddy G. "My collar's entirely loose, you see." They asked directions from a man nearby, who said, "If buttons you want to buy, take the 4th elevator, 4th floor right, and ask a clerk if there's one in sight." A door slid open, and a boy in blue said, "Room for 1, but not for 2." Teddy G stepped in, and up it went, before Teddy B knew what it meant. Each bear was now on a different floor. They'd lost each other in the department store. Teddy B walked round the things to see. He hunted and searched for Teddy G. But he couldn't find him, high or low. For an hour at least he was on the go. He asked some questions here and there, if folks had seen his brother bear. A floor walker stopped him and said, "What is his color, black or red? And where did you lose him? The time and date? Was he lost today, and if so, how late? Describe his clothes, his height, his walk, his age, his eyes, his face, his talk." These things he wrote down on a pad, and made some signs, and called a lad, and said, "Take this, and go around with this young man to Lost and Found." The two went off as they were told, and found Teddy G all neatly rolled in brown paper and tied with string, with marks and tags, the funniest thing! It was worth a trip a mile to see this paper package marked Teddy G.
"Where have you been?" said Teddy B. "I have hunted high and low," said he.
"Buying a button?" said Teddy G. "I have it here. Cut the string and see. It's ivory white. It cost a dime. I couldn't buy two. I hadn't time." They left the store at 5:30 and started again to complete their drive. The Bears returned when the drive was o'er, to their suite of rooms on the 11th floor. The hotel was gay with flags and flowers. Children were gathering there for hours, 1,000 girls and 1,000 boys, laughing and chatting with merry noise in parlors, halls, and on the stairs, to say good-bye to the Roosevelt Bears. The Bears dressed up in traveling suits, and brushed their hair and shined their boots, and then went down when this they'd done, to shake the hands of every one. A band was playing a lively air, and children running here and there, as merry a crowd as was ever seen in hall or home or on college green. Ice cream was served, and lots of cake, and candied sweets of every make. The Bears gave each their photograph, and signed their name. 'Twould make you laugh to see the signature of Teddy G, a great big paw for the letter T, and the rest like tracks across the snow, and for the G, a bear's big toe. Teddy B could write a scholar's hand, as fine as anything in the land. The girls gave Teddy G a gift of flowers and ferns too big to lift, and the boys a bag to Teddy B.
"The very thing I need," said he. "I'll pack your love in this handsome grip, and take it with me on the trip."
When Teddy G made a speech like this: "To every girl I throw a kiss. The rose is red, the violet blue. These flowers are sweet, and so are you." At 7 o'clock they were off again, to ride once more on a Pullman train. They raised their hats and said good-bye to boulevards and buildings high, to Chicago homes and parks and halls, as their train pulled out for Niagara Falls. End of section 9. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 10. The Roosevelt Bears at Niagara. The Bears had heard of this great resort, of its fame at home and at foreign court, of its bridal parties and lovers' walk, and its hackmen bold and their jolly talk, of its suspension bridge and prospect park, and Indian trophies made of bark, and its whirlpool rapids, gorge and cave, and the battles fought by soldiers brave. Their train pulled in at 9:30. The air was warm, the day was fine. They started off at once to view the rolling rapids and the big horseshoe. They sat for a while on the very brink, while the roaring waters made them think of bygone days and fun they had, and of things they did a little bad. They walked around for an hour or more to see the water and hear it roar. They crossed a bridge to the other side, and back on a coach for a little ride. They asked a Canadian if he knew why Niagara water was split in two, with the biggest half on the British side, and if he thought it was a fair divide. They were in the woods in the island park, cutting their names into beech tree bark, when a boy came close, quite unawares, and said, "Hello there, Roosevelt Bears! I have hunted for you high and low. I want to show you where to go."
"Hello yourself," said Teddy B. "What's your name, and what's your fee?"
"I'm secretary of the N.B.C. My name is Tom. We're a club of 10. There's Bob and Dan and Hub and Ben, and Will, he's lame, and Joe and Jack, and Fred and little Nettie Black, who lost his arm on the railway track." We study nights and work all day, showing tourists the easiest way to get about and what to see, and charge the very smallest fee. We meet at 7 o'clock at night and divide our money square and right." "I like your talk," said Teddy G. "Bring me Neddy Black," said he. "I'll pay him wages good and large, and add refreshments without charge."
"I'll take Will," said Teddy B. "The boy that's lame, he'll do for me."
The boys were brought, and the Roosevelt Bears were now relieved from tourists' cares. Tom was asked to come around in the afternoon to a picnic ground and bring the fellows, every one, for a basket lunch and an hour's fun. The bears and boys did every stunt. They shot the rapids on a punt, standing up with poles in hand and waving hats to folks on land. They rode the gorge like a shooting star and came back again on a trolley car. They saw the falls from every nook where tourists stopped to have a look. They went behind the boys their guide and saw the falls from the other side. They dressed themselves in rubber suits with rubber hoods and rubber boots, which covered up all but their nose and made them look like Eskimos. They signed a book, the tourist list, and stepped on board the Maid of the Mist, which tipped and tossed and tried its best to make the Roosevelt trip a test of how near the falls a boat could steam before being forced back by the stream. They did the falls and now were through. There was nothing left for them to do. "How do you like it?" said little Will. "This water tumbling down a hill."
"Like it, you ask?" said Teddy B. "What else could the water do?" said he. "If you'll come with me out west some day, I'll show you falls running the other way."
"They call them geysers, or some such name, but they're uphill waterfalls just the same." "Your show's all right," said Teddy G. "We came this way the falls to see. We've seen the falls, we've heard its noise, and now I want to see the boys. I'm nearly starved, I want to eat. I want to rest my eyes and feet, and work my jaws, and have a chat about boyhood days and things like that." "If you'll come with me," said little Ned, "I'll find a place where you'll get fed on doughnuts round and heaps of cake, and pumpkin pies my mother's make." So off they went as the way he led, and found the place just as he said, the jolliest spot to have a lark, in the thickest woods of the island park. The boys were there, the happiest bunch that ever ate a basket lunch. There was Bob and Dan and Ben and Fred and Jack the president and little Ned and Treasurer Joe and Will and Hub and Tom the secretary of the club. They ate their lunch all seated round on stones and logs and on the ground. The bears related stories brave of fights they had in a mountain cave, their winter home in the wildest land, where once there lived a robber band. This cave was under a mighty rock, and its door of stone was made to lock so tight and fast that once 'twas done, the bears were safe from hunter's gun. This cave, they said, had sacks of gold stored there by robbers who never told their hiding place till all were dead.
"And now the gold is ours," they said.
They asked the boys to come out west and spend the winter and have a rest, and see the cave and get a sack of this hidden treasure to carry back. When the lunch was o'er, the fun began. Teddy G took Jack and Joe and Dan, and showed them how to climb a tree to the very top the falls to see, while Teddy B entertained the rest with tricks that he could do the best. They gave each boy a $1 bill, and 5 apiece to Ned and Will, the 2 new 5s as extra pay for the work they did so well that day.
"We must be off," said Teddy B. "We've 100,000 things to see. We'll send you postals when we're gone, to let you know how we're getting on."
Teddy G said he would surely write when he got back, and each boy invite to their home out west on the mountain side, and send them money for the railway ride. The boys lined up a happy row as the train pulled in for Buffalo. The bears shook hands with every lad, and said what a jolly day they had. A speech was made by Teddy B.
"Good-bye, good luck, do right," said he. "Remember that Niagara's views were made to cure folks of the blues. Its rainbow sign is Niagara's laugh. If we need it east, we'll telegraph."
The lads replied, "Hurrah! hurrah! When you see New York, come back this way." As the buffalo train moved out of sight, the bears called back with all their might, "We leave for Boston town tonight." End of section 10. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 11. The Roosevelt Bears arrive in Boston. The news was telegraphed ahead that the bears were tired and had gone to bed. The crowds at stations saw the two at the sleeper windows peeking through, nodding at children left and right, who traveled miles and stayed up all night to see the car of the train at least, which carried the bears on their journey east. Things went well till 6:30, when the Roosevelt Bears got in a mix. The train had stopped at a little town, when Teddy G stepped out and down, and across the platform to a stand, where folks eat breakfast from their hand. He ordered steak, well done, and ham, and a chicken pie, and toast with jam, and fried potatoes, and coffee hot, and Boston baked beans in a pot. The waiter nearly had a fit, but he placed the order bit by bit, while Teddy G stood by and read the things the morning papers said. Meanwhile, the train had gone ahead to another town at a lively rate, where Teddy B, who had risen late, got a telegram from his traveling mate, which read this way: "I'm off my trolley, I'm left behind, my breakfast's jolly. Get off yourself and wait for me. Let the train go on. Signed, Teddy G."
"He's off his trolley, sure enough," said Teddy B, a little gruff.
The porter was asked by Teddy B, as he tossed him over a good-sized fee, to get his baggage and fasten tags on trunks and canes and travelling bags, and to deliver all to an address he wrote from directions given in a dainty note, which reached him from a little miss when in Chicago, and which read like this: "Dear Roosevelt Bears, Papa says I may invite you both to come and stay with us at home 3 days and nights, when you come to Boston to see the sights." Her address she gave on Beacon Hill, and a postscript said her brother Will would meet the train if they'd let him know the railroad line and the time to go. The note was signed down at the end, "Priscilla Alden, your little friend." The porter thanked him for the fee. "I'm sorry to leave you here," said he. "I'll deliver the baggage, as you say, and tell Priscilla of the delay." The train was off, and Teddy B was left 12 miles from Teddy G. Teddy G was called on a telephone with a loud "Hello!" and an angry tone, and told to hire a wheel and see if he could cover the distance to Teddy B by 9 o'clock. The road was fine. A train would leave at 9:30. Teddy G came down the road that day, at such a speed, the farmers say, that time was turned the other way. Teddy B had scarcely left the phone, when Teddy G, in a small cyclone of wheels and dust all whizzing round, arrived at the station, safe and sound. "The bears will get to Boston soon," said papers which came out at noon. "They're on the way, they'll be here at 2. From South Union Depot they'll drive through the city streets to Beacon Hill, where Priscilla Alden and her brother will entertain them days and nights, while they are seeing the Boston sights." Great crowds had gathered along the route. There were girls in dresses gay and cute, and boys with flags, and their teachers too, for the schools were out and lessons through. A jolly crowd the bears to greet, to cheer them all along the street. The bears arrived, the crowds hurrahed, the children laughed, the brass bands played. The merchants closed their stores that day, and gave their clerks each double pay. Flags were flying from poles and towers, and factory whistles blew for hours. Guns were fired and bells were rung, a welcome sound from every tongue. Flowers were strewn along the street, to be trampled under the horses' feet. The bears took off their hats and bowed, both right and left, to the happy crowd. Priscilla's home was reached at 3. "I'm glad to see you," said Teddy B to Priscilla Alden at the gate. "I'm very sorry that we are late." The bears were taken to their room and made to feel like folks at home. At 4 o'clock they had cake and tea, and then walked out the town to see. They rambled over to Copley Square to look at a library building there. They asked a man in charge if he would answer questions, 2 or 3. "Tell us, good sir, what all this means. Is Boston culture made of beans? And does it take but a single week for Boston children to learn their Greek? And what do all these marble halls have to do with making codfish balls?" "And if born in Boston, is it true, then that is all folks have to do to master life and conquer fate, and pass St. Peter at the Golden Gate?" These questions are not answered yet. The man said he would volumes get, which they could take away and read, and find out why Bostonians lead in beans and culture and codfish cakes, and New England pie of various makes. They took the books, and down they sat, to study Emerson and the Autocrat. Said Teddy B, "I'm sure it's true, these books were made for me and you. But so was time, and food and play. I'll read them through some other day." Said Teddy G, "My book's all right, but it doesn't help my appetite." They closed the books and took them back, and placed them on a library stack, and told the man they'd come again, and study Holmes and Emerson. They turned their steps toward the Golden Dome, and across the common to Priscilla's home, and as they walked along the way, they made plans for the following day. "Boston's big, and there's much to see. We must lose no time," said Teddy B. "We'll go tomorrow to Bunker Hill, and take Priscilla and her brother Will." End of section 11. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 12. The Roosevelt Bears see Bunker Hill and Plymouth Rock. Priscilla Alden and her brother Will were unable to go to Bunker Hill. They expressed their regrets to the Roosevelt Bears, and told them how to climb the stairs to reach the top, and to get a view of a dozen cities and the harbor too. Will gave guidebooks to Teddy G, and wrote down things for him to see, and where they were, and what each cost, and the thing to do if they got lost. Priscilla said, "I am going to write some cards to friends to come tonight, to shake your hands and have some fun. Stay home I must and get things done. I regret to start you off alone. If you get into trouble, use the phone."
"The day is fine," said Teddy B. "We'll walk around the town and see the old State House and Faneuil Hall and a church or two, and perhaps we'll call on the governor and the city mayor, and tell them plainly not to care which party rules the old Bay State. When one is in, let the other wait." "When I'm pitching ball," said Teddy B, "I'm a straight and curving G.O.P., and Teddy G, when at the bat, is a hitting, dodging Democrat. But when we change and I am he, I'm a Democrat and he's G.O.P."
"We're losing time," said Teddy G. "I vote for children and they for me. Goodbye, Priscilla. Don't work too hard. Be sure to send an invitation card to Jack Bodine and his sister Nell in Vernon Street in Somerville. We met Jack on a ranch out west. He gave us clothes and did his best with the food he had to put up a feast and start us happy on our journey east."
Priscilla promised, and off they walked, and as they went they played and talked with boys and girls along the street, and stopped a policeman on his beat, and asked which way and the street to take, and the square to cross and the turn to make, to go here or there or up or down, without walking twice around the town. They lost themselves in Scollay Square. They didn't know which way or where. There were streets enough, but which to take to get around without mistake was more than they could figure out. So they stopped right up to look about. A beggar blind on the sidewalk near heard what they said and called, "Come here! You're the Roosevelt Bears, by things you say. I know your names. You've lost your way. These many squares and all this maze of narrow paths and crooked ways have taught Bostonians the newer light, to walk by faith and not by sight." The blind man took them here and there, and showed them all the places where patriots were born and cradled too, and where they worshipped, and where the few fought for their rights with stubborn will, in Faneuil Hall and on Bunker Hill.
"We thank you kindly," said Teddy B, "for all these things you've helped us see. At Bunker Hill we want to stop and climb up to the very top."
Teddy G put cash in the beggar's hat and said,
"You've shown us this and that. Some things we're glad enough to see, to prove the dates of history. But we started east on this tramp alone, to make some history of our own."
They said good-bye to the blind man there, and started up the winding stair. They reached the top and saw the view, and there they planned some things to do.
"We'll write our names," said Teddy B, "where all who pass can clearly see that we were here, the date and day, when the Roosevelt Bears came down this way."
"A good idea," said Teddy G. "I want to make some history, and put my name where it will stand with all the great men of the land."
So down they went to the ground again, to a street near by where they had been, and ropes they bought, both good and strong, and paint and brush to take along. When the bears returned, they barred the door, and shut the keeper in a store. Teddy B went up to the very top, and from there he let the cable drop to Teddy G on the ground below, where a crowd had gathered to see the show. A board was fixed to make a seat, and up he went 200 feet, and wrote, "Taken again," where all could see, signed Teddy B and Teddy G. The police came out in squads of 6, and called to the bears to stop their tricks, and boys in blue and firemen too, but there wasn't a thing that they could do. They couldn't get in to climb the stairs, and their longest ladders wouldn't reach the bears. When their work was through, the two came down, the happiest fellows in all the town. Teddy B stood up on a bench near by, and made a speech which made folks cry, while Teddy G, on the other hand, danced a jig to make them laugh. From Bunker Hill to Plymouth Rock was 2 hours' journey by the clock. But the Roosevelt Bears were bound to trace the nation's history from the place where the Pilgrims landed to Oyster Bay, so off to Plymouth they went that day. In a small hotel on a pleasant street, they stopped a while and got things to eat, and brushed their clothes, and shined their shoes, and rested up, and read the news.
"This is the rock," said Teddy B, "upon which we built this country. The rejected stone on which you stand is the cornerstone of all this land."
Teddy G replied,
"Where'd you get that? In Emerson or the Autocrat? This rock's too small for you and me. How it held the Pilgrims I can't see, unless they sat on each other's knee. From all the things that I have heard, that Mayflower ship must have been a bird."
And thus they talked for an hour or so, of times 300 years ago. The bears returned to Beacon Street, to Priscilla's home her friends to meet. Boys and girls of every rank had gathered on the river's bank. Jack was there with his sister Nell, the only two from Somerville. The play went on for an hour at least, when all sat down to Priscilla's feast of strawberries and cream and cake, and chocolate sweets of Boston make. They planned next day to have some fun on the road to Concord and Lexington. They'd hire an auto for the day, and make things hum along the way. Teddy G said he would the auto steer, and repeat the ride of Paul Revere. End of section 12. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 13. The Roosevelt Bears take an automobile ride. The Bears had spent some strenuous days in catching up with modern ways. But of all the hours they ever spent on railroad train or in mountain tent, or seeing sights since east they'd come, or riding broncos going some, or up in balloons on a stormy lake, or having picnics of cream and cake, or riding rapids in a punt, or climbing mountains game to hunt, or teaching school, or trying to make a farmer's bull some medicine take, or having dinners in a dining car, this ride to Concord was best by far. They hired an auto of the latest style, with record 130-mile, from Holyoke to Marblehead. At least that's what the agent said. In 90 minutes and seconds 6, without a stop or a thing to fix. The Bears were shown the works inside, and how to steer, and how to ride, and what to do to climb a hill, and how to start or stop at will, and the horn to blow, and the way to back, when there's danger forward on the track. Teddy G said he would chauffeur be, and run the car like 63, while Teddy B said folks would find him following pretty close behind. They started off like millionaires, with cash to burn and free from cares, down Beacon Street and across Back Bay, and over a bridge, and on the way through Cambridge town by the famous elm, with Teddy G still at the helm. They stopped a while at Auburn Mount to view the mountains and count the names of authors widely known, carved in history and in stone. At a famous grave they picked some green to wear in memory of Evangeline, and to carry home to their mountain bower to remind them of the children's hour. And off again on a country road the auto carried its happy load. Up hill and down, and slow or quick, they seemed to know the auto trick. Past trolley cars and loads of hay, and delivery wagons on their way, and schools let out for a half-hour's fun, till they reached the town of Lexington, where down the street, with speed and dash, they rounded up without a smash. The Bears read history for an hour in the Hancock House and Belfry Tower. On monuments and tablets here they learned the stories of Paul Revere, and Captain Parker and his patriots brave, who tried to make King George behave. Then off again on lively run to see the home of Emerson. Said Teddy B on Concord Green, when they had all the places seen, "I'd like to stand up there alone, like that minute man on that block of stone, in soldier pose, without a laugh, and you have to take my photograph." The man of bronze was lifted down, without a kick or word or frown, placed on the grass and made to stand where folks who passed could shake his hand, while Teddy B in the soldier's place, with gun in hand and upturned face, looked like a statue in a book, while Teddy G his picture took. They started back at 2:30 and said they'd run the auto through from Concord town to Auburn Mount, as quick as any clock could count. In half a minute they hit a pace, like an auto in a challenging race. But something snapped, and Teddy B went overhead out front to see, while Teddy G stopped up so quick it made him do a handspring trick and land in mud, a pretty mess, while the auto groaned and breathed distress. "We've broken something," said Teddy G. "It's underneath. Get down and see." "Get down yourself," said Teddy B. "I'm all the way down, you bet," said he.
but there's nothing broken in me, I know. That mud I struck was soft as dough."
But down they got and looked below, and back and front and high and low, and twisted bolt and unfastened screen, and got their hands all gasoline. A lad came by on his way from school, and told the bears they mustn't fool with lighted pipes and gasoline, or they'd blow up the old machine. The lad knew autos like a book. He told the bears just where to look, and what to do and how to start, when things inside have come apart. They thanked the boy and said 'twould do, and off they went like 72. Their speed increased at every grade, and doubled up each turn they made, and gained each time the horn they blew, till they went so fast they simply flew. Teddy G tried hard to slow the speed, but he couldn't make the levers heed. Each thing he pulled made the wheels go round, so fast they hardly touched the ground. There was nothing left for him to do, but simply steer and see it through, while Teddy B on the seat behind gave him directions of every kind. Dogs and chickens and boys at play climbed up on fences to clear the way, while teams and cars turned left and right, and their drivers stopped to see the sight. Teddy B was brave and held the wheel, and kept his nerve like a man of steel, and steered the auto safe and sound, till he ran it into a bank of ground on Boston Common with a stop so quick that both bears did their tumble trick, and landed clear across the street, and hit the walk at a policeman's feet. "Do you know the law?" the policeman said, but Teddy G just shook his head, while Teddy B said, "We may be green, but the thing to fine is this old machine." They argued points to prove their case, and told the officer face to face that this ride of theirs was a record run, and they didn't like to be pinched for fun. But all their talk was of no avail. They were taken off to Boston jail, and given a cell, and locked up tight, and told to stay there for the night. End of section 13. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 14. The Roosevelt Bears at Harvard. 100 lads of the Roosevelt Club, the bravest schoolboys in the hub, marched to the court, put up the bail, and got the 2 bears out of jail. They took them with them to their hall, where tables were set for one and all, with guests of honor, the Roosevelt Bears, at the center table, in the biggest chairs. The dinner through, the chairman spoke, and said, "The arrest was just a joke, but the boys tonight would like to know how fast you made that auto go. They'd like to hear, in your own good way, of your journey east from day to day, of the hunters captured on the mountain side, of the bronco race and the railroad ride, of the days you spent at farm and fair, at the country school or in the air, of the moving stairway and the button hunt, and the trip you had on the river punt. It will please the Roosevelt Club," said he, "to hear a speech from Teddy B." Teddy B stood up amid loud applause, and cleared his throat, and stretched out his paws, and made a speech so full of fun, the boys were sorry when he was done. The lads then called for Teddy G. "I'm not a talker much," said he. "I like the boys and girls I meet, but I cannot say things on my feet. I'm more at home with things to eat, and with your permission, I'll take my seat." The dinner o'er and the speeches done, they met the fellows one by one, and shook their hands and wished them well, and the evening closed with a college yell. 2 Harvard boys took the bears that night to their college rooms to coach them right, and get them ready for their degree, an L or 2 and a great big D. They dressed the bears like monks of old, with robes and hoods and cords of gold, with little caps which stuck on tight, and made 2 bald spots round and white, and a massive book for Teddy B, and a long crooked staff for Teddy G. The bears then marched in solemn tread, from hall to hall, the boys ahead, to a chamber of horrors where degrees are made by a sophomore class in masquerade. The hall was ready when the bears got there, with the master coach in a big armchair, and a score of boys in gowns of green, the queerest crowd they had ever seen, each with helmet, shield, and spear, and flowing beard like old King Lear. The master coach, in a crimson cloak, stood up in front, and thus he spoke. 2 hairy bears from the woolly west are here tonight to take our test, to ride our goat and pay the fee which admits them to our society. These scores of tutors, well versed in views, will put you through your P's and Q's, and when you've passed and paid your fees, they'll report you ready for your degrees. If the belted knights will bring in the lamb, the bears can take their first exam. A cathedral bell in a nearby tower rang 1 to 12, the midnight hour. The hall was hushed as still as night, and the shadows made by candlelight of moving figures here and there gave a shivery feeling to the air. The lamb brought in by the belted knights was the hero of 100 fights, a donkey mascot, hard to ride, and full to the brim of kick beside, and mad all through as hatters 6 to be waked at night for students' tricks. The master coach said to Teddy B, "To ride this donkey, which you see, is your first exam for a degree. You must ride together, without a fall, 3 times around this assembly hall." Said Teddy B, "It's not like a bear to flunk exams or to take a dare. We'll ride your donkey in western style, and make rounds enough for half a mile." The mule kicked high and shook his head, and roared aloud to wake the dead, but the Roosevelt Bears climbed on his back, and made him run around the track, and wheel and bunt and dance and kick, and a dozen times do the bronco trick. But they hung on tight without a fuss, and were given their marks 100 plus. "If the exam is through," said Teddy B, as he locked the door and took the key, "we'll ask some questions ourselves, and see if these tutors bold and coaches smart know all the things that they impart. If this master coach knows every rule, let him try himself to solve the mule." "We'll ask you each," said Teddy G, "to ride this mule yourselves, and see if you can do his geometry." So Teddy B, with whip in hand, made each climb up at his command, and try his luck at a donkey race, and get tumbled off at every place, while Teddy G, with a record book, put down the marks which each one took. When the exam was through, each sophomore had a dozen corners good and sore. Then Teddy B gave up the key, and said, "Bring on your next degree." 2 seniors came, with cap and gown, and asked the boys to please sit down. They opened a book of college law, and told each bear to place his paw on printing there in black and red, and to read aloud what the printing said. "I promise true," read Teddy B, "that every Harvard man I see will have my help till he goes to smash, if it uses up every cent of cash." "I give my word," said Teddy G, "that a Harvard man I'll always be, and every time I do things rash, I'll ask a Harvard man for cash." The bears then signed what they had read, and listened to what the seniors said. "These gowns and caps and scrolls you see, we give you now as your degree. A double L.D. to Teddy B, and a D and 2 L's to Teddy G." The exams they took had ended right, and the bears went off to sleep that night, and to dream of fun the following day, which they would have on Boston Bay. But Teddy G dreamed some out loud, and once he was talking to the crowd. "You can have your L's and your D's," said he. "Dr. Teddy G doesn't sound like me." End of section 14. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 15. The Roosevelt Bears sail down Boston Bay. 'Twas late next day when the Bears awoke, and got through breakfast and had their smoke. They asked a sophomore, whose name was Sam, what marks he got at the mule exam. "I have the marks all right," said he, "on elbows, back, and hip, and knee, 100 plus, and for luck a few in special colors, black and blue." But Sam was happy. He had come to say that he had a program for the Bears that day. If they'd note the streets that he marked down, they'd find their way around the town. They took his list and said that they would walk from Harvard to the Bay. Said Teddy B, "I want to go to Quincy Market on Merchant's Row and see what kind of things folks buy, and Boston prices, if low or high." "If there are things to eat," said Teddy G, "I'll go along, you can bank on me." So off they went in greatest glee. They found 2 boys with a market store, a cart for a counter, and nothing more, except the goods the boys brought down from a little farm 10 miles from town. The goods consisted of bags and kegs filled with potatoes and fruit and eggs. The boys worked hard for every cent, to keep their mother and pay the rent. They drove each week to the market square, whether rain or shine, to sell things there. This day their prices were very low, but potatoes and eggs were going slow. When Teddy B stepped up some fruit to buy, and to ask the lads the reason why their sales were slow and the crowd was small, and why potatoes and eggs didn't sell at all.
"I'll sell your stuff," said Teddy B. "Let me get up in the cart and see."
And up he got where the lads had been, and called out loud to the crowds of men,
"Come here and buy, at prices high, potatoes to roast and eggs to fry, the reddest apples and plums of blue. Bring here your wives and your children too. That's 1 for each and 2 for you."
The crowd that gathered packed all the square. Teddy G climbed up on the old gray mare and sat contented while his brother Bear sold potatoes and eggs at a quarter each, and tossed them as far as his arm could reach. The farmer lads enjoyed the fun and collected the money from every one. They made enough in half an hour to buy 12 barrels of flour, and to pay their rent for a year or less, and to buy their mother a new silk dress, and money over for a vacation week on seashore rocks or by Mountain Creek. To the farmer lads they said good-bye, and rambled on, new things to try. They met Priscilla and her brother Will, who had walked downtown from Beacon Hill to get some candy and records new for a talking machine, 12 or 2 to play that night at a small affair which they were doing to help Fresh Air, and to pay the expense of poor boys 3 for a country week down by the sea.
"A machine that talks," said Teddy B. "Take us along and let us see."
And off they went to a candy store, where Teddy G bought boxes 4, 5 pounds in each for the Fresh Air show, to help the children to make things go, and a special box as Priscilla's own, for the kindness she the Bears had shown. From there 'twas but a little walk to the place they sell machines that talk. Of all the fun the Bears had had, and of things they did both good and bad, the hour that day with the talking machine was as jolly an hour as was ever seen. They opened the box to find the band, and hunted for singers beneath the stand, and touched the record, and held the horn, but saw nothing so funny since they were born. They danced a 2-step and sang as well, and heard Uncle Josh his stories tell, and listened to negro minstrels sing, and whistles blow and church bells ring, and an auction sale and an auto ride, and 150 things beside. A record was made by Teddy B, who talked down into the horn to see if a speech of his in the box would stay to grind itself off when they went away. while Teddy G sang his prettiest song for Priscilla Alden to take along in record form for her fresh air show, to please the children and let them know that their jolliest friend was a Roosevelt Bear, whose one regret was that he couldn't be there. They left Priscilla and her brother Will, and went to a lunchroom and ate their fill of Washington pie and Boston cream, and then to a livery and hired team, and drove through Newton to Riverside, and over to Dedham for the country ride, and through a park, and back again, by a Parkway Drive and Jamaican Plain. They were driving full 3 hours or more, and returned the team at 4:30. They then tramped down to a wharf to see the place where patriots pitched out the tea, in the year 1773.
"I like this harbor," said Teddy B. "It's the first time we have seen the sea. Let us hire a boat and go down the bay, and smell salt air to close the day."
"Let us sail to Salem," said Teddy G. "There are witches there I'd like to see."
They engaged a boat, a small canoe with scarcely room enough for two. It had a sail, and the wind was west. They steered their craft their very best. They sailed about for several hours around the forts and lighthouse towers, past Old Nahant and Egg Rock Light, when a storm came up, as black as night. They tried their best to turn about, but the wind was high, and it drove them out. The storm that night was the worst in years, and it filled the children's eyes with tears when the morning papers said next day that, tossed by winds and ocean spray, the Roosevelt Bears had been blown away, blown out to sea on the darkest night, without things to eat or the smallest light. Life crews searched up and down the bay, and returned next night to town to say that they didn't find even a floating hair, either brown or gray, of a Roosevelt Bear. End of section 15. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 16. The Roosevelt Bears arrive in New York. The storm that raged on the bay that night blew the Roosevelt Bears clear out of sight. They were now alone on the open sea, no land nor ship, no house nor tree. They were expected back some friends to meet at a big hotel on Boylston Street, with them to dine and to a playhouse go, to spend the evening and see a show. But the night was spent on the ocean blue, in the wildest storm, in a small canoe, with paddles lost like a shipwrecked crew. 'Twas dark as pitch, so scared were they that neither spoke till break of day. When the sun was up, Teddy G said he would like those eggs, about 43, that he sold to the women on the square, boiled hard or fried, he didn't care. Or if eggs were scarce, he thought a dish of griddled whale, or some other fish of the larger size, would fix him right, and cure a weakness of his appetite.
"My doctor said," spoke Teddy B, "that an ocean voyage would be good for me, but a trip like this without things to eat is just a little incomplete."
The air was warm and the ocean wide, but there wasn't a thing on any side but the boundless sea and a sky of blue, with the central spot their canoe. Teddy G was wishing for a feast. If he couldn't eat, he could drink at least. He scooped up water from the sea, and took good swallows, 2 or 3, when Teddy B stopped him up quick, and said sea water would make him sick.
"You ought to know," said Teddy B, "that all this water in the sea was mixed with salt to make it keep, and to preserve the fish in the briny deep."
But Teddy G was too sick to speak, and mumbled something like "Mountain Creek," and "home again," and "railroad ride," and wished he was back on the mountain side. At noon that day there came in sight a tower of ice, all glistening white.
"An iceberg that," said Teddy "Let us hoist our sail and go and see."
The sail went up, the wind was fair, in a little while their boat was there, close to the berg like a mountain high, with its 50 spires up to the sky. On a floor of ice at its farthest side was a polar bear having an ocean ride. As they sailed around to a landing place, the Roosevelt Bears came face to face with the biggest brother they ever saw, and white as snow from nose to paw. "Ship ahoy!" called out the polar bear. "What port are you making, and what's the fare?"
"We're coming aboard," said Teddy "to get some dinner, and then we'll see if your ship is safe. We'll pay your rates to take us back to the United States."
The two bears found a home quite nice, a grotto cave and a lawn of ice, with sealskin rugs and an ice-chest seat, and walrus liver and fish to eat. Teddy put a match to a pile of wood, and made a fire and cooked the food, while the polar bear told Teddy about the Eskimos and the northern sea, and the 6 months' day and an equal night, and the sky lit up with electric light, and the northern pole and its size and height, and the flag that floated there day and night, the stars and stripes of the USA, while Teddy told the polar bear of the United States and the cities there, of Chicago streets and buildings tall, and Niagara River and its waterfall, of Boston Common and its famous trees, and Harvard College where they grant degrees, of the auto ride and their harbor sail, and the night they both were locked in jail. And thus they told of things they knew, while Teddy made a walrus stew.
"The dinner's ready," said Teddy "I've cooked 3 times enough for 3, and 1 meal extra for Teddy."
And down they sat, the hungriest bunch that ever ate an iceberg lunch. They spent that night with the polar bear. They enjoyed the ice and the ocean air. They were off for fun, and they didn't care how far they sailed, which way or where. At breakfast time the following day, a ship was seen a mile away. Said Teddy
"Our ship's too cool. Let us hail this liner from Liverpool, and get aboard and pay our fare from this icebound port to anywhere."
The polar bear climbed up on high and waved a sail as the ship went by. The captain saw the signal fly, and reversed the engines and stopped the ship, and asked 6 sailors to make the trip, and bring on board this icebound crew, who seemed starved to death and frozen through.
"We're the Roosevelt Bears," said Teddy "A Boston storm blew us out to sea. Take us on board, and we'll pay the fare from here to New York or anywhere."
The polar bear said he'd like to stay on Canadian ice for another day.
"On British soil I was born and bred, and prefer to stay right here," he said. "I'll keep your boat, this small canoe. If my ice gives out, 'twill help me through."
When the sailors signaled word by word that the Roosevelt Bears were coming on board, the stars and stripes were hoisted high, and pennants floated in the sky, and the crowds on deck with joy hurrahed as Yankee Doodle the brass band played. They walked the ship from bow to stern, and shook hands with children at every turn. They saw the engines and furnace fires, and dynamos and electric wires, and the halls and gangways and big saloon where they would lunch that day at noon. To the lookout aloft went Teddy on a ladder of rope to the top, to see if the land were near and the ships about, and to call "All's well" when the bells rang out. Teddy took a turn at the wheel a while, and steered the ship for 1/2 a mile. A wireless message was sent on shore to say that the bears were found once more, and to order their baggage without delay to the New York hotel where they meant to stay. At a concert given on the ship that night, Teddy made a speech that was out of sight, while Teddy in his usual way, made children happy with dance and play. Reporters met them at Sandy Hook, and asked them questions and pictures took, and as their ships steamed up the bay, the folks on deck heard both bears say,
"We'll dismiss all schools while here we stay, and turn days and nights into hours of play. We'll buy a bank for fun and toys, and spend the money on girls and boys."
End of section 16. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 17. The Roosevelt Bears advertise for a guide. The Bears put up at a good hotel, but its name and place they wouldn't tell. They came to New York, they said, to see its boys and girls, and to be entirely free from club engagements and street parade, and fashion calls and speeches made at midnight dinners, and other cares too bothersome for mountain bears. They came east to learn, of course, they said, but not to toil for their daily bread. They spent some days in seeing the town, doing Fifth Avenue up and down, crossing the park for a morning run, or riding subway trains for fun, or walking Brooklyn Bridge to view the ships beneath go sailing through, or climbing up on buildings high to view the city from the sky, or resting themselves in Union Square, smoking pipes and free from care. They were seen on the street nearly every day, but where they slept no one could say.
"We'll advertise," said Teddy B, "for a guide to take us round to see the Hippodrome, and the Wax Musee, and Coney Island, and the circus show. Who knows the city, and where to go?"
"I have heard it said," spoke Teddy G, "that advertising pays," said he. "I'll write the ad, and then I'll see if the morning papers will print it free."
The ad was written, and here's the way it read in print the following day. Wanted, a boy about 12 years old, who'll do the things that he is told, who'll work as hard as most boys play, and start the job for $1 a day, with wages doubled each day at noon, and a week's vacation with each new moon, and board thrown in and clothes as well, and other things this ad can't tell. Call around tomorrow at 9:30 in Central Park, where you'll see a sign, in the pasture lot if the day is fine, on an old oak tree near the roadway there, written on cardboard, 2 feet square, and signed below by a Roosevelt Bear. Teddy B went up to the park that night, and put up the notice, square and white, in the pasture lot on the old oak tree, where every boy who came could see. The Bears next day took a handsome ride to Central Park to hire their guide. They sent a wagon on ahead, with cakes and fruit and baker's bread, and stools and table and camping tent, and other things they got on rent. They reached the park at 8:30. The boys were entering by every gate, and crowding towards the old oak tree, the written notice there to see. Some were dressed in their Sunday best, and came prepared for the hardest test, while others with scarcely a thing to wear, and without a nickel to pay their fare, and with hair uncombed and dirty face, had walked for miles to get the place. For an hour the Bears rode up and down, watching the lads from every town who had come by train and trolley car, and scores on foot from near and far, to get the job and earn the pay, and take a week each month for play.
"At 9:30, said Teddy B, "let us pitch our tent by the oak tree, and line up the lads for an interview, and find out if they know their P&Q.
"Line up the lads," said Teddy G. "How many lads do you think have we? The row would cross the park at best, from north to south, or east to west. But I'll go ahead and make a line, and then roll it up like a ball of twine."
Teddy B took his place beneath the tree, while the names were called by Teddy G. The first in line was Billy White. To be in time he had stayed up all night. He hadn't hat or coat or shoe, but the thing that counted was that he knew. In reply to questions by Teddy B, he said he had younger brothers 3, that his father died 5 years ago, but he wanted the Roosevelt Bears to know that if he got the job he'd earn the pay, and show them round both night and day. Teddy B wrote down what Billy said, and asked him then to step ahead, and have some lunch, and wait around, till he saw each boy upon the ground. The next in line was Andy Clark. Like Billy White, he had come at dark, and sat beside the old oak tree, with other boys since 3:30. Teddy B put questions good and hard, and wrote the answers on a card. His age and height, and what he knew of baseball scores, and the man who threw the curviest ball and the swiftest too, and how much a working boy should do for a full day's pay, and what he thought of knocking off when the days were hot. But Andy answered quick and smart, "You can bet on me, I'll do my part."
"This little lad," said Teddy G, as he introduced boy number 3, "hasn't a home, and never had a father or mother, good or bad. His name, he says, is Muddy Pete, and he makes his home upon the street. But he owns a dog, this terrier white. He's Pete's companion day and night."
Said Teddy B, as the lad stepped up,
"How much will you take for your terrier pup?"
But Pete replied,
"Not much you don't. Sell Cribs for chink? Well, I guess I won't. But Cribs and me will be your guides, and shine 'em up your shoes besides."
"How old are you?"
said Teddy B.
"And your address you'll please give me?"
"I have no age," said Muddy Pete, "and my home is always on the street. We know them postmen all around. If you send a letter, we'll get found."
The lad and dog were told to take a basket full of fruit and cake, and wait around for an hour or two, till every boy had an interview. The next in turn was Homer West, in a summer suit, the very best, and collar white and tie of blue, and eyes so clear he could look you through. And following him came Bobby Ho, the biggest boy in all the row, and then a lad from New Rochelle, whose name he said he wouldn't tell, and Charlie Smith and Tommy Gore, and Edward Brown, and hundreds more.
"It's my busy day,"
said Teddy B, as he entered 993.
"7 boys more, and then we're through. But what in the world are we going to do with 1,000 guides and a terrier pup? The sum's too hard. I give it up."
The boys were grouped around the tree, and lunch was served by Teddy G. Then Teddy B spoke up and said,
"We'll think it over tonight in bed. The boy we want, and what to pay, and the plan of work for every day. When we've decided which lad to hire, we'll send a message to him by wire. You'll hear before the night is through if the lucky guide we hire is you."
Then Teddy B each boy's hands shook, and said good-bye and wished him luck, while Teddy G right then and there gave needy boys their railway fare. As the Bears returned to their hotel, they heard Muddy Pete his terrier tell,
"That job is ours, as good as done. We beat 'em eating 2 to 1. I'll bet you, Cribs, as sure's you're white, we'll get that telegram tonight."
End of section 17. Recording by Hannah Mary. The Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Section 18. The Roosevelt Bears see a circus.
"What is this show on the boards I see, with all these pictures?"
said Teddy G.
"The printing there," said Teddy B, "reads circus and menagerie at Madison Garden with ring and clown, the biggest thing this week in town."
When they went upstairs to their room to see which lad they'd choose their guide to be, this plan was proposed by Teddy G.
"These 1,000 boys we saw today should have at least one good day's play. I'd like to buy each lad a seat and give the crowd this circus treat. Where we get our cash the lads may guess. Here's another package by the night express. While the money lasts, I'm in for fun. We'll start for home when our cash is done," said Teddy B.
"Your plan's not bad. I'll send a telegram to every lad."
And this is how the message read, which they sent that night as they went to bed. "Meet us tomorrow, and don't be late, at Madison Garden entrance gate, at 2 o'clock, and come prepared to work your best and not get scared. The job is yours for half a day, from 2 till 5 at double pay. Bring sure this message for us to see. Signed Teddy B. and Teddy G." The bears were up with the sun next day to make their plans and prepare the way for an afternoon of circus play. They went around at 8:30 to buy the seats at the garden gate.
"I'd like to rent," said Teddy G, "your circus and menagerie, for the afternoon, to give a show to some deserving boys I know."
"We'll buy the seats if you'll agree to let us perform," said Teddy B. "We want to try a thing or two to show the boys what bears can do."
"We'll sell you seats," the man replied, "and let you do some things beside. You can ride a horse around the ring, or act as clowns, or dance or sing, or lift big weights, or ride a wheel down a steep incline on a rope of steel." The seats were bought, the terms were made, the program fixed and the money paid, and the Roosevelt Bears were given a place with performing lions and chariot race. At 2 o'clock the boys were there, 1,000 strong from everywhere. Teddy G explained to each the fun, and gave a ticket to every one. They marched around the menagerie and saw the animals with Teddy B, who talked to those from foreign land in words the lads didn't understand. He took the paw of a Russian bear and asked how things were over there. The British lion, a restful heap in mind content, was sound asleep. Teddy B reached into the lion's cage and twisted his tail till he boiled with rage, and thus they went the circus round, and saw each cage upon the ground. At 3 o'clock they filled each seat. There was Billy White, and Muddy Pete, with Cribs his dog, and Homer West in summer suit the very best, and Andy Clark and Tommy Gore, and Edward Brown, and hundreds more, and every boy with a Yankee flag and a box of candy and a peanut bag. The flags to wave when the tricks were done, and peanuts to throw around for fun. The band struck up and the show began. The clowns made fun and races ran. The horsemen rode around like kings, and riders jumped through paper rings, and athletes swung on rope and bar, and 100 things both near and far went on at once, high up and low, the biggest kind of circus show. Like heroes of 100 fights, the Roosevelt Bears in colored tights stepped in the ring at 3:30 to please the boys and let them see that they could jump or dance or sing, or ride a horse or anything. The fellows cheered with all their might as the Roosevelt Bears bowed left and right. The Bears were sport from the very start. They stopped at nothing and did each part with such success, so quick and smart. The applause rang out both loud and long from every side of the happy throng. Teddy G went up and rode the wheel down the incline on the rope of steel, while Teddy B at breakneck speed went round the ring on a fiery steed. They took the stand to box about, but neither could knock the other out. But the play that caused the biggest laugh was when Teddy G on a big giraffe and Teddy B on a camel's hump tried which could make the highest jump, or make the best speed around the track, from start to finish 4 times and back. Teddy B couldn't make the camel turn, and at every round he had time to burn, while Teddy G on every trip on the slanted back couldn't get a grip, and his tumbles came so thick and fast that the camel beat him out at last. And thus they played for an hour or less, and then went back to a room to dress. By Teddy G the lads were seen, when the show was o'er, on Madison Green. He gave them each $1 pay for the work they did for them that day. Muddy Pete with laughter nearly split his ribs, when $1 each went to him and Cribs. End of section 18. End of the Roosevelt Bears by Seymour Eaton. Recording by Hannah Mary. Comebestill.blogspot.com